just want to, first of all, I want to tell you, everybody in here, a member of the media, I appreciate sincerely your patience during this process. And I mean that in all sincerity. I understand that each of you has a job to do, and it's a somewhat competitive job, and I respect the job that each of you do day in and day out, and I sincerely appreciate the coverage that you give our athletic programs from 1 to 19 day in and day out. And I made probably the most difficult decision I've ever made professionally in letting Mike Anderson go. Mike Anderson is a great man. And I didn't think I needed to compound or shed any negative light on Mike Anderson by having a press conference after I let him go. I didn't see the point in that. The only thing that was going to come on that was negative things towards Mike and how he ran his program. And I made a decision that was difficult. And so I hope you guys understand why I didn't have a press conference after that. And this is the first time collectively together we've been through a search process, and I don't know how my predecessor ran his searches, but I ran my searches in a very close-knit circle. There were many of my senior administrators that were not included in the searches. We did not use a search firm. I feel like it's my role as a director of athletics to be able to identify who is a great fit for our programs here at the University of Arkansas, and that's how I did that. And I know by doing so, that led to a lot of misunderstanding of information that may have been put out there by agents or other coaches, or sometimes self-serving interest along the way. But I want you guys to know that it was first and foremost what I wanted to do is run a search of the utmost integrity. And as John and I went through this process together, I asked him several times as we were traveling together, because it's very important to me, John, have I done anything to compromise my integrity during this search? And every time John answered me, it was no, and that was very important to me. But so I appreciate what you guys do and the job that you do, and now I'll open that up for questions.
You have questions, Trey?
Hunter, how do you start on a process like this? Where does your pool come from? Is it just past experiences? What's the start point to a coaching search like this?
Sure. Especially in a sport like basketball, that I played basketball and I've been around it and I watch it and I consume it, and it's a passion that I have. I watch other programs around the country and take notes of coaches that I think are doing special things and may be a fit at the institution that I'm at, which is currently the University of Arkansas. And then you take that list of people I have an interest in, and you have to find if they have an interest in your position. And so that's kind of that first phase, and then to the point where there is a mutual interest in the position, then you kind of move it to that next course, like where I made an initial phone call to Coach Musselman, and then there's a visit. And I like to go visit coaches quite candidly in their homes with their families, because I think you learn a lot about coaches and if they're a fit for what I'm looking for our department. I mean, you hear me talk a lot about family and one Razorback, and I want coaches that first of all want to be here and that I think fit with our other 14 or 15 head coaches. And then from that, you've got to call some people that have worked with them, whether that's a director of athletics, whether that's a head coach at an institution, someone that knows about them and how they work at their particular institution. And then that helps you kind of narrow that field and shrink that field down to one or two that you really zero in on.
Well,
Hey, Hunter, I guess that player meeting was at your house?
What's that?
The player meeting was at your house?
We had a cookout at my house last night. I thought rather than the usual locker room meeting where the coach meets in the locker room, we just had a cookout at my house, and I thought that was a kind of an easy kind of breaking the ice way for the guys to meet their head coach. I've got a pool table, I've got a ping pong table, I've got some cornhole boards. They're watching WrestleMania, they're playing video games, and I thought that was just a neat way for those guys to relax a little bit and not be in the locker room where they're all kind of tense, and great opportunity for them to meet their new head coach.
Players, they've been under a lot of frustration on social media when you let Mike go, and seemed pretty upset. But seeing them today, they looked pretty happy. They looked happy on the video. Where do you think the players are? How do you think that meeting went? What do you think when Eric said there's enough talent in here right now to go to the NCAA tournament? Were you kind of like, hey, don't say that, or what was your feeling?
Well, as an athletic director, I love that. What he talked about during the interview process was setting goals for your team and talking about those goals, and simple things like the code to the locker room is Selection Sunday, the date of that, and so the guys are always constantly thinking about what that goal is. And so I've got no problem with a coach setting a goal like that, and in his first day on the job, really putting that goal out there.
And how'd you think the players, they were upset, but, you know, they're young and they
Sure.
know stuff. How do you think they're doing?
I think they're doing great. After Coach Anderson had met with them roughly 2 weeks ago, I followed it up with my own meeting to talk to them, and I allowed them to throw whatever daggers they wanted at me, quite candidly, in the locker room, and there were very few thrown. Obviously, those players all cared for Coach Anderson, and he was the one of the reasons they were here at the University of Arkansas. So that change was tough. But what I can tell you is last week, if you went over to the basketball practice facility after the week off, most of those guys were in there working out. They were lifting weights. They were on the gun shooting. They were playing 5-on-5, and so I think that speaks volumes of they want to be taken to the next level, and so they were preparing for their new coach. And so I think their attitude, obviously when Coach first walked in last night, they're all kind of quiet and stoic, but after they went upstairs and got their meal and were sitting around with Coach talking, and he went down there and was very intentional about his conversations with them. I thought it went really, really well.
Otis?
How much Coach Musselman, his NBA experience, being a head coach and stuff, and how much did that play into the decision to hire him? I mean, did that factor in quite a bit?
I don't know if it's necessary his NBA experience, but his experience at all levels and the fact that he had been successful at all levels. And, you might look at his record at Golden State and say, well, he had a losing record, but he also looked like he was the runner-up for the NBA Coach of the Year in his first season at Golden State, where he really flipped that program around. And so he's been successful at all levels. But here at the University of Arkansas in the Southeastern Conference, you want to recruit the elite players that want to play at that next level. And I think what he can prepare them for is that next level, whereas he talked about whether that's Europe or that's the G League or the D League, whatever they call that league now, and the NBA, and he can tell them, here's the path and here's how you get there.
And Josh?
Hunter, you were very forthright there just about the process. You said you wanted to make sure that you fully vetted, that you talked to a number of different people. How important was that to you to talk to a few different people instead of kind of deciding on one person and really moving down that path?
Sure. I think you have to compare. When you're doing a search, I think you have to compare coaches. I don't know how you say who's the best coach if you just zero in on one and you don't compare coaches to other coaches in the industry and talk to them about their philosophies and make sure they're a great fit. And so that was important to vet a number of candidates before we made the final selection.
All right, Trey?
Hunter, was there a moment where, whether it was in the interview or later, and I don't mean just like when you offered the job to him or decided to tell everybody that you were offering the job to him, was there a moment where you said, I think this is the guy? And what moment was that?
It was the moment I offered it to him on the phone on Friday, and he my ear was shaking. He was yelling so loud. He was so excited. And that's what you want when you offer somebody a job. I mean, he was about ready to jump through the phone if he could have. He was so excited that he had been offered the opportunity to be our head basketball coach. And right then and there, obviously I had made a decision I thought was the right decision, but when you call a coach and you offer him a position and he has that level of excitement and Danielle's in the background and she's yelling and screaming too, it's the right decision.
Kevin?
With the social media usage by Chad Morris and the success he's had winning that, and with Eric Musselman, we've talked about that. How much of that, portraying the university that way and embracing that plays into the hire? I mean, is it a big percentage? Is it part of it?
I would say that was a minute percentage of that social media. I mean, that's coaches are dependent on that, and that taking the brand that we have at the University of Arkansas and using that in the recruiting process through social media, because that's what young men, that's how they're being engaged and that's how they're communicating with. And so coach understands that and the use of social media and how that helps him in the recruiting process in the same way that Chad Morris and his staff do.
Hunter, a question.
Yes.
You mentioned the SEC and the landscape now with the coaches and the quality of coaches this league has, and then Buzz, Williams is at Texas A&M. Musselman fitting in and being competitive in a league right now that's really, really building their basketball programs.
Yeah, it's very important. I mean, I think it's the experience he's had at all levels, coaching elite athletes and the connections he has. I mean, I think one of the first phone calls he got yesterday when this became official was from Coach Calipari, and I think that shows the respect he has from coaches around the country that, he said Coach Calipari was welcoming him to the league, and he says, I'm coming after him, so I don't know how much he's going to welcome me when we get on the court with him.
And Bob?
Hunter, how many guys did you talk to about this job? I mean, formal interviews and maybe even casually, guys expressing interest. How many guys did you actually talk to about the job?
As we really shrunk the pool down from, I would say, a dozen to about 4 or 5 that we really zeroed in on.
And then what was that week like? I mean, for you obviously, I guess, wanted to check with some other guys. We were always feeling like, okay, Eric, I think he's the guy, but I want to make sure. Or what was that week like, or whatever?
Sure. That was what the week was like. I mean, just comparing each of the candidates that we wanted to interview, and you've got coaches that are somewhat in the midst of seasons that you may want to have a conversation with. And I'm very adamant in how I run searches that I'm not going to talk to a coach when they're still competing, when they have student athletes. That should be their focus. And I think that's a bad way to run a search if you try to connect with coaches and take their distraction away from the student athletes and what they're trying to accomplish at their current institution.
Mike?
Just watching, did you watch tape? Did you ask for tape of Nevada? Had you seen a number of their games, and what did you think if you did? What you saw?
I watched, I don't know that I watched tape. I was able to pull up some highlights of the game in which they played against Florida, and they weren't very good early in that game, and then I think they took Florida out of their comfort zone and started to speed that game up. I think we all know Florida likes to play really, really slow, and they were able to slow Nevada down early, and then Nevada was able to flip that and almost came back and won that game, and so that was a game I paid particular attention to.
Hey, Hunter,
what ultimately was your reason in deciding to change coaches here?
I think we did not have the level of success. We had success, but we didn't have the level of success I believe we could have here at the University of Arkansas. And that was reaffirmed again. I said this earlier. When I talked to other coaches around the country, whether they had an interest in this job or not, or they were calling to talk about another candidate in the pool, it was always that this is a top-tier SEC job. This should be a top 2 or 3, a team that's in the top 2 or 3 in the SEC year in and year out, and one that's in the top 20 year in and year out. And that we hadn't met that consistently over the past 8 years.
Just since Eric doesn't have any ties to Arkansas, how much are you going to try? I know he's got a lot to do, but try to get him around the state this summer with Razorback club meetings and that kind of thing.
Well, he'll start tackling that, and him and Coach Morris are heading over to Little Rock together on Wednesday for an event. So we're already starting to get him out and about across the state, and our external team and our Razorback Foundation team, they're already putting together a schedule. That's very important to get him around the state, and he understands the importance of him and his staff being in the high schools across the state as well. So it's kind of a twofold. He's got the recruiting piece where he needs to get out and around the state with him and his staff, getting into the high schools, and of course we want to get him out and around the state and engage with our various constituents from all corners of this state.
Yeah, Coach, I guess just looking back, kind of an overview of Musselman's past teams, what were some of kind of the defining qualities that his teams had that intrigued you?
I think, first of all, that he talked about it. They play hard for the entire game. I remember a game a few years ago. I think they were playing Cincinnati in the tournament, and I think Cincinnati may have been up by 20-some points in that game, and they came back in that game. I think they ended up winning that game. And just that they play hard throughout. There's not, they may not play great throughout, but they're always playing hard. And I think that, you look at, I think Nevada had 24 wins in the 2 seasons prior to Coach Musselman's arrival. They haven't won less than 24 games in the 4 seasons since he's been there, and I think that's a testament to him changing the culture of that program and the fact that what he instills in them. And I think just how they played and played hard throughout was one of the things that stuck out in my mind. Bob, you have another question? I can't believe that.
We'll go Matt Jones, and then we'll...
Well, no, Bob got his hand up first.
He's much closer. He's been working 5 days in a row. We'll go Matt first.
Hey, with Mike, at what point did you make your decision on Mike? And was there anything in your your end of season meeting with him that he could have said or done for him to be allowed to come back for another year?
I mean, Mike and I met on Monday after the season was over. We played at Indiana on Saturday, and then he had a kind of a list of things that I wanted to talk about on Monday that were delivered to him. And then we met, I think, some attended at the Blessings saw that we met at the Blessings, and that wasn't an attorney. That was actually John Fagg that was in that meeting, as well as our basketball sport administrator. And I think just a little bit more of a vision for our program moving forward may have helped. And quite honestly, I did not make my decision until I laid my head on the pillow that Monday night. It was as I said, it was an extremely hard decision. I mean, as an athletic director, you let a coach go that's never had a losing season, that was so closely tied to this program and the history that he had here with Coach Richardson and the great man that he was and all he stood for. I mean, I told him the day I let him go, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to do, Mike, because you and I stand for so many of the same values in our lives and what we want to happen for these young men off the basketball court. But ultimately, what happens on the basketball court is as an athletic director, how I have to evaluate our program moving forward.
When you let him go, was it like face-to-face in his office or your office? Or?
It was face-to-face in my office.
Yeah.
And as you would imagine, Mike handled it with the utmost class.
Yeah, I saw. Did you see the video he put out?
I did.
What did you think of that?
I think it's Mike Anderson. He's first class.
And they got a little lighter, happier. What kind of dog did your wife get?
We got another golden doodle. So now we have a 10-year-old golden doodle and a 10-week-old golden doodle. It is awesome.
Does the young dog bother the old dog?
Oh, yeah. The young dog likes to nip at the old dog's ears.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone.